Well, everyone, so welcome to our first pretty much matchup of Rye versus Lorraine. This is game one. As you see, we are both fire. Lorraine ended up winning the dice roll, and we're going to go ahead and take our turn to draw 8 cards for the start of our turn. Now, I'm sort of looking at the hand, playing Fire Arcane, sort of just trying to figure out how many arcane cards I have, how many things, possible to get the arcane pay as much as possible. Instead, I decided to put one arcane down, scry the skies for 0. But then I think we are looking at an erratic bolt as well as another card sitting into our memory, and we just pass the turn. So we can go ahead and get everything sort of situated here. Due to this being a Yeti tournament, you're going to see me put my hand up above the deck a couple times, not really fiddle with it too much. I mean, sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. But mostly just think about responses and put them down. So our opponent does the usual fire things. They're going ahead and create a shock, and I see a tempered seal go into the grave. I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is either a regular fire Merlin, or we're going to deal with some fire aggro with rending flames and shenanigans that's going to be happening as well. So right off the bat, we see a Lorraine hit the field with this sort of adversity, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, we're dealing with the aggro list. Aggro list is rending flames, home by fires, and a couple other cards of the sorts. So our opponent is going to go ahead and home by fire before their recollection. Get a count and get +2 damage on home by fire. We go ahead and let that resolve, as we do thankfully have a resolute stand in hand. I'm gonna let our opponent draw for turn. They're gonna rending flames right off the rip. They're rending flame for, I think it was like 3, 7, like a whole bunch of damage. I think it was like 10 or something off the rip. And we decide to pay our 3 to resolute stand to try and negate as much as damage as possible. So -3 out of the 3 from rending, 3 from sword 6, another sword is 7, so 4. So take 8 damage off the rip. Pretty much our turn 1, their turn 2, which is really a little rough for us. But try to do what we can. We're going to go ahead and see if we can find anything else in our hand later on. But we sort of had to pay a couple extra arcane cards, and I think a careful studies into our memory as just to cast Resolute Stand at the time. So opponent's thinking, trying to figure out what they could do to combo for the turn, and I think they're going to go ahead here and pass. So when they pass, we're going to go ahead and look at leveling the Rye right off the rip, because we're going to keep as much health as possible up as long as we can, just so we can try and hit level 3. So we're going to go ahead, have our opponent pick a card 1 through 6, and we go ahead and discard and Anger the Skies. With the Anger the Skies discarded, we get 1 towards our Arcane level for Rye. So we get our 1 level, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what can I do for this turn? I do have a Dungeon Guide in hand. I'm thinking if we're going to get Rending Flame again, we're going to have to Dungeon Guide. I'm thinking about putting some hands down, putting some cards down for visual representation for myself, because sometimes, you sit there and you cast some cards and you realize you're a card short because you do your math wrong because you're looking at the cards in hand. But we are going to go ahead and Dungeon Guide. So Dungeon Guide is going to get us to level 2 Rye. Usually you want to save this for level 3. But I figured, all right, we sort of need the HP at this point. So opponent's going to pick from 2. And we're going to discard an Arcane Blast as well as I think it's a Voltaic Sphere or an Arcane Sight. I'm going to put 3 more down, and we're going to Increasing Dangers just to draw card for turn. Takes us up to 3. My thought process behind this was to get the count and light counter on Rye. Getting the light counter will give us a draw. We do run 2 Resolute Stands in the deck. If you watched our deck video posted the other day, link in the description will be for that. But I figured, all right, if you're hitting a Resolute Stand, we at least try to negate some damage as a whole. I'm going to see me try and fiddle a little bit, just because it's the first time recording some webcam games. I'm going to try and figure out what's best to have representation on the camera, as well as getting it for recording possibilities. You will note I don't have the audio here recorded for my opponent, mostly because of the fact that I don't want them to, any of their personal life or anything like that happening coming through. I don't want it to be blasted on the stream. So I figured this is the afterwards recording. The opponent's trying to think of what they have, how many cards you have in hand, what our life total is at, and trying to do some math. So we're going to grab a Crystal of Empowerment. Then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this is going to be a Fireball. This is going to be Devastating Blow, which gets extra damage off of +3 levels, and I'm like, all right, this is going to hurt. This is going to be a very hurtful swing. So off the bat, opponent is going to go ahead Devastating Blow, and then in response to their own Devastating Blow, they are going to crack Crystal of Empowerment to get the 3-level bonus counter. So it does 7, 8, 9 damage coming at my face. And we're sitting there looking at the damage like, dang, that's a lot. We're going to be at 17 pretty much right off of turn 1. I know I don't have the Resolute Stand in hand. Looking, thinking I'm going to go ahead and draw, see if I can hit off the top, trying to get damage. I miss. I'm going to go, all right, we take 9. We're going to go ahead and be at 15. Oh, sorry, 17. Did math wrong. I did math wrong because I was too busy thinking that's 7. So at 17, opponent has a couple cards in hand, sword's gone. I was like, okay. And then they play Conscript. And gets also the +1 attack bonus because it's level 3. So it's going to come in from number 3. We're going to be at 22. I was like, okay. 20. I was like, okay. 22 life. We got a level. We have no other choice. Like, we got to hit something here. So we're at a level. We have 4 cards in memory. So I have our opponent pick one to keep. And then with our one to keep, we are going to get rid of a Fireball, Advent of Stormcaller, and a Power Overwhelming. We're going to go up to 5 Arcane cards into our memory. Into our Banish Zone, which is going to make Rye level 8. So it gives us a couple options. We hit a Careful Study, something that's a draw. We're going to draw for turn. We didn't hit it. And I'm starting to think to myself, okay, so what can we do here? Like, I have a Spell Shard Arcane, but it doesn't really get me through too much. I had an Arcane Disposition in hand, and I was thinking, okay, do we just rip? If we rip here, try and go off as much as possible, and might be able to stabilize and get us back into this, because it might be one of situations where if we don't rip it, we're going to be pretty dead in the water anyway next turn. So first we're going to kill the Conscript, give ourselves a little bit of thought process. We know we can't Peace Reunion anyway, because we don't have the cards in hand. We don't have 4 cards in hand. So right after rip, we're going to go, okay, Arcane Disposition. What can we hit here? Like, maybe we can hit up here in the mana. Maybe we can hit a Careful Study to get our Enlighten counters. So we're going to go ahead and okay, it was up to 1. And all right, we didn't hit Careful Study. 2 cards. All right, so we're going to pay a couple cards down, and I'm pretty sure we are going to Increasing Dangers again, if I'm not mistaken. Shock Therapy to target, just because we had nothing in hand. We had to discard it anyway, so we figured, okay, we'll just pay for the card. And we said, all right, if our opponent has 5, our opponent has 5. And we're going to see what happens here. So right off the rip, we go ahead, we're at 20 HP, looking at what our opponent has. They have 5 cards, can Rending again if they want to. They can't Devastating Blow, that's only for 3. They have a weapon, so Rending Flame's only good in for 6, but if they have Rending Flame's nothing we could do anyway, because we had to Arcane Disposition. And yep, scoop it up. They had the Blazing Throw and the swing, and that was so. As we're getting into game 2 here, I sideboarded in my 4th copy of Resolute Stand, 2 copies of 2 more copies of Resolute Stand, 1 copy of Peaceful Reunion, and I took out my Disintegrates, and I took out as well, I think, Shock Therapy and Increasing Dangers. I feel like I needed them too much for this matchup. As also known as Spell Shard Arcane. The whole point was trying to stay alive as much as possible. So we hit our opener, and our opener, I think, wasn't anything special. We hit the usual Scry this guy, Scribe, the other Arcane card off the top, perfect. Put it into our memory, passed the turn, and said pretty much go ahead. We do, I think, have a Creative Shock in hand at this point that we look at and try to determine if we want to do it at the end of the turn. Yeah, I don't think we want to too much, only because of the fact that we have 2 Arcane cards, so we're just going to hit off the rip. Our opponent, of course, just goes ahead and does the usual fire opening hand, gets their fire card, looks, sees what they have, and then sort of determine what they're going to do next. So opponent looks, keep on looking. I'm sending to being, okay, I don't think I hit my Resolute Stand or Peace Reunion yet in hand. I was like, all right. So we sort of have to dig. We have to get to the point that we can stabilize a little bit more, because we're just going to get a ton of damage thrown at our face. So we really got to sit and think what we're going to do. Sitting and looking. I think our opponent passes the turn here. It's the main reason why we pick up our hand. No, I guess not. Just sort of looking, still trying to determine our next play as a whole. So as our opponent is looking and figuring out everything, trying to figure out their combo for the turn, I think they're mostly trying to determine whether or not they go for some units early on, or they create a shock now. And they may have a Cremation Ritual in hand, which could be what they're thinking of. And they're going to have a Scavenging Raccoon, so they're going to go ahead and eat our Scry, and then they're going to get in for 1 damage. we get in for that one. You know, when you're playing something like Fire Lorraine, every little bit of damage matters as a whole that you do to your opponent. It's just as much going to do as anything else. And they are going to go ahead and do the cremation ritual to draw 2 extra cards. Sort of what we expected from the opening hand. Not much we can do in response to it, as Sacrifice is part of a cost. We don't have counter spells, as we are not water. From there, opponent puts their hand down. We're looking through everything else they have. So looking through their hand. Put their memory back down. Look back at their hand. Our opponent passes the turn. We look and go, okay, which one of these do you want to banish? They banish the right one, and they go ahead and banish the erratic bolt. Works for us. We have a level. Go up to level 1 Rye. I don't think we have a Dungeon Guide in hand. We're not going to cheat out early. Let's try and get to level 3 off it. We draw. And here we're sitting there thinking, looking at our hand, trying to figure out what we have to do. I think we also have a Peer in the mana in the hand. But the Peer in the mana is just going to be sort of used as just feed stuff. Actually, sorry, I lied. So we do have another Scry. Scry, look at the top. I think the top card is a Careful Studies. We bin that to the bottom. Only because of the fact that we want to draw into Resolute Sands or Peace Reunions. Like, we're just sort of filtering for stuff to keep us alive longer. And I think that second card was a Fireball. So we sat there, thought the Fireball could be useful, especially when it comes into doing something like killing the Conscript or any other attackers they might have. It comes into play later on. Explaining to my opponent, like, yeah, we did this. This is the card drawn in the memory, and that I put the original top card at the bottom of the deck. Just moving the opponent so he's sort of aware of what's happening. We pass the turn. Our opponent chooses to, I think, Spark a Light here. Get 2 damage in unprevented. I could be wrong. I could be mixing games up. I think our opponent's still determining what to do. There's also, I think, trying to figure out if they are going to go into level 1 Lorraine, which they did not. They decided to crack the Fire Bubble. They draw, put the card in the hand. Still before recollection step in case they drew a Creative Shock or they already had one in hand just so they can get the useful. And yep, here's the Sparklight. They're going to do 2 extra damage to us, put us up to 3. And there's not much, no real response we have for that. Our opponent's going to draw for turn, and now we're sitting thinking, okay, so they can rending flame us, but it's not going to hurt as much. They don't have a sword, which is sort of beneficial for us. It's still going to deal a decent amount of damage. Yet there's only so much they can do to begin with it. So our opponent is looking, trying to figure out if they want to Rending Flames, if they have any other cards they could do to really push some damage, especially as they go to level 1, or at least trying to set up and sculpt their turn for the next turn kill, if possible. So you do play the Conscript. They're going to get in there for 2 damage. I think I look at my hand. I try to figure out what we have here. There is a Creative Shock. Just trying to figure out if we have the right means to deal with it. We are going to pay 3. We're going to Creative Shock to draw a card. We'll draw 2 cards. We draw our 2. Look at the cards in our hand. Try to figure out when we have discard. I'm pretty sure we have a Disintegrate in hand that we did sideboard one out for if they have a Tithe. Nope, it was a Careful Study afterwards. Sorry. So I think we had a Careful Studies Peer in the mana, or Careful Studies another combo piece card that we really needed. So we didn't want to get rid of it. So we ended up just taking the 2 damage to put us up to 5. Oh. I was going to figure out what else they do. They already know they got the damage pushed through. They don't still have to Rending Flame. Their Rending Flame right now I think is only for 2. They are going to Devastating Blow though for 3 damage. Push a little bit extra. We go on up to 8. And our opponent will end the turn there. We're going to shuffle up, try and go to level 2 Rye. Get a little health that we anything that we can do to try and stabilize ourselves more. And hit level 3 so we have our Spell Shit Arcane and Anger the Skies online. So we lay out our 5, have our opponent pick 2 of them. Our opponent picks number 3 and 4. And they go ahead and hit the Fireball and the Arcane Disposition. Hurts a little bit for the Arcane Disposition, but we sort of got to deal with what we can. We're not even Arcane right now, so we have to go with what we can and then explain to my opponent what we have in our banishment. I sort of push it over, feed, so it's a little bit easier on the webcam feed. And I'm sort of thinking, okay, so every hit, we need a spell counter in hand, so we are going to Peer in the mana to give ourselves the best option because we don't have anything else to cast. And Peer in the mana will go ahead and net us 5 counters, bringing us up to a total of 7 because we got 2 off the Peer, 2 off the Peer's secondary ability where you gain counters equal to your level and we're level 2. And then we had the 2 counters already from level 1 Rye, so we get 2 extra looks if we need it to try and find a Resolute Stand or anything to stabilize us for an extra turn. Our opponent's going to go ahead and untap. They're looking at materialization. They're probably going to go ahead and materialize level 1 Lorraine. At this point, so they get their warrior class bonus online and deal whatever they need to us. So that's what they do. They're going to go to level 1 Lorraine. They're going to go ahead and grab a Sword of Seeking afterwards because they have a unit, so sort of the other sword doesn't really get the extra bonus damage. And they discard number 4, which is fine. And they go ahead and discard Brrrrr Acolyte, which doesn't do too much against us as a whole. So they're not losing too much value there. As we wait for our opponent to figure out the next move, they're going to go ahead, like I said, grab the Sword of Seeking. It's probably the most sword that makes the most sense. We play a little bit with our Rye just to sort of center on screen. And our opponent does get their sword. Sword of Seeking's online. They do have 3 cards into their waiting room for Rending Flame is online. And like I said, the conscript is there. Conscript's going for another 2. They still don't have the level bonus, so we're up to 10. 12 more damage to go. It's not looking too good right now. You're trying to see whatever we can do to stabilize for this game. Opponent's really thinking about the combo piece, trying to think how much damage they can push through this turn and what's the most valuable play possible. So this matchup is rough. Our opponent's going to Creative Shock. I mean, this matchup gets rough for us only because of the fact that it's an aggro deck. Rye doesn't do too bad with aggro decks, especially those that don't have to rely too much on unit aggro. So there's pushing a whole bunch of damage. This is one of those lists I feel like was going to be strong. And yep, here is the Rending Flame. Discard 3. So they have 3, 4, for a total, I think, of 8 damage, if I'm not mistaken. In response, we are going to go ahead and draw. Whiff on the first draw. Draw again. 1. Go ahead and look, see what we have. We do end up drawing the Resolute Stand, take a little less damage, so we end up taking only 2. Going up to 12. And our opponent from there go ahead and passes the turn. Here we're trying to figure out if we're leveling up. We don't get the draw for the turn because we had to use the Resolute Stand's level 2 ability, which means you don't get the draw for the turn, which will only leave us 3 cards. And trying to think if we have a Special Arcane or anything like that to get around level, but I think we're sort of stuck leveling to begin with. We need the extra life just to sort of try and stabilize as much as possible. So we are going to go ahead and level. I put the dice on top of the deck as a reminder, like, hey, you can't draw. Don't give yourself a game loss. Like the dice, I use dice as a reminder for certain actions. Even when I'm doing Merlin level 3, I put dice into my recollection zone and my memory, so I don't recollect before using the counter. And oof, right here we got rid of our Arcane Disposition, our Spell Shield Arcane that we had in there, and our Anger of the Skies. We really needed that Spell Shield Arcane to try and stabilize us another Rending Flame. And we're like, okay, hopefully we can hit another. We don't have any Enlightened counters on us. We are level 8 though. If we hit another Careful Studies, but we did bin one earlier, which is going to come back to bite us in the butt now. There's not much else we can do about that. So we look at our hand, try to figure out, okay, what's the best line of action we have? We have 3 cards. We don't have any Enlightened counters. We can't draw. And we just try and bluff our way into saying, hey, go ahead, take your turn. We have 3 cards in hand. We might have the Spell Shield Arcane. So at this point, we're just trying to bluff our way through it to maybe make our opponent think of their actions a little bit differently. And our opponent goes and does that. They look through, try and figure out what's in their memory, what they're going to materialize. I think they do have a GCR still. They're not running Quicksilver Rail, so there's no Tithe Proc to come around. Fear. Take a quick peek, see what's in our hand again, just to sort of flash. Trying to do things in between as we wait for our opponent to decide on their action. So our opponent goes ahead, looks at the material deck a little bit, and they are going to go ahead and pull a crystal, which means, all right, we're going to get the level 3 bonus, another devastating blow or something that's going to come across. It's going to deal pretty much lethal damage as we're at 12. Conscript do a 3 to 15. Devastating blow will do another 7, which will be 10. We'll be at 22. And Blazing Throw will just be lethal. So we just try and bluff our way through as much as possible and see what happens. Downside to them, another Sparklight though, where Spell Shield Arcane buff doesn't go through, and they do end up ripping the other Rending Flame. So Rending Flame is going to come through for another 3, 4, 8 damage, and going to put us up to 20. And at this point, it's like, all right, if I have it, I have it. determining I'm not trying to bluff, thinking, bluffing, and I think at this point I just pretty much say, yeah, damage goes through. We'll let this go. Where do you go? And then they in response, home by fire, and it's pretty much like, okay, yep, they get there because it's done before the damage step. And that pretty much wraps up the entire match and the series. And yep, just pretty much look through, see if anything I hit off the top, and I'm just tell him he has it, and I'm dead. Well, yeah, that sort of does it for the game. Like I said, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this gameplay video. I'll have more from the tournament later on, and thank you guys again for watching. Peace.